What if I told you the urgency that hits you out of nowhere, no warning, just a wall of need, has almost nothing to do with your bladder at all? There's something else in your body doing the actual squeezing, something most men never get told about, and once you see it, you can't unsee it in every sudden dash to a restroom you've ever made. It happened to me once in a hardware store, of all places. I was standing in the paint aisle, nothing urgent going on in my day, when the urge hit. Not a slow build, not a warning, just that same wall of need so sudden I had to abandon my cart and half jog to the front counter to ask where the restroom was, like a man twice my age with none of the dignity. I made it, barely, and I stood there afterward, hands on the sink, asking myself the same question I know a lot of you have asked in your own version of that moment. Why does it come on that fast? Most men assume the bladder itself has gotten weak, worn down like an old hinge. That turns out to be the wrong culprit almost entirely. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what's squeezing things down there, and it isn't your bladder losing its grip. It's something else entirely, tightening around a channel you can't see or feel until it's already too late. A large share of men past 50 deal with some degree of enlarged prostate, and by the time you're past 60, the sudden, can't-wait urgency isn't rare, it's just rarely explained. These days, that hardware store moment feels like it belongs to a different man. I sleep through most nights without a single trip down the hallway, and when I do need to go during the day, I get a real warning, minutes, not seconds. Enough time to finish a conversation, find a restroom, and walk there like a person, not sprint there like I'm being chased. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because for years I assumed sudden urgency like that was simply what happened to a man's body past a certain age, and I was wrong about that. I want to be honest about how long I lived with this before I understood it. At 62, the urgency showed up maybe once a week, always with a little warning. By 68, that warning had shrunk to under a minute some days. By 74, there were afternoons I didn't trust myself to sit through a movie or a long car ride without mapping every bathroom along the way first. I started declining things, a friend's 2-hour lunch, a drive to see my brother 2 towns over. Then bigger things. I skipped my granddaughter's graduation because I couldn't guarantee I'd make it through the outdoor seating, and I told her I had a scheduling conflict instead of the truth, because the truth felt too small and too embarrassing to say to a 22-year-old. I never brought it up with my doctor directly, not for years. I'd mentioned my blood pressure, my cholesterol, whatever test was due, and the appointment would end before I worked up the nerve to say the actual sentence, "Sometimes I can't make it to the bathroom in time." So instead, I just adapted. I quietly restructured my life around proximity to a restroom and called it being careful, not what it actually was, which was living smaller than I wanted to. Here's what I eventually learned, and what nobody ever sat me down to explain plainly. The sudden, overwhelming urgency almost never starts in the bladder itself. It starts with the prostate, which sits wrapped directly around the tube that carries urine out of the body. As the prostate enlarges, which happens to most men to some degree as we get older, it doesn't narrow that channel evenly, the way you might picture a slow squeeze. It presses inward on the urethra unevenly, creating a partial blockage the bladder has to work against every single time it empties. Picture squeezing a garden hose most of the way shut, then pushing a full bucket of water through it fast. That's the mechanical work your bladder does every trip, without you ever feeling the squeeze itself. Because of that partial blockage, the bladder almost never fully empties. Some urine is always left behind, no matter how long you stand there. A bladder that starts every cycle already partly full reaches its trigger point far sooner than one that emptied completely. That's the piece that explains the speed. It's not that the urge builds slowly and you're simply bad at noticing it early. It's that the bladder starts from a head start it never should have had, so by the time you feel anything at all, there's almost no runway left between "I should go soon" and "I have to go right now." Layer in that the bladder wall itself, working overtime against that resistance for years, tends to grow more irritable and reactive, firing off urgency signals earlier than it used to, and you get exactly the pattern so many of us live with. Not a weak bladder, a bladder doing hard, constant labor against a channel that's been quietly narrowing for years, finally sending out alarm bells with almost no warning attached. For years, one number ran my life: The PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night, certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer. It measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Once I understood that the real culprit was the squeeze on the channel, not the bladder giving up, I went looking for something that actually addressed that mechanism instead of just papering over the symptom. And what I found surprised me, because it wasn't some exotic pill or a prescription with a list of side effects longer than the benefit. It was a plant compound called beta-sitosterol, something that's naturally present in foods a lot of us already have in the pantry. Pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, walnuts, almonds, avocado, even a modest amount in olive oil. I want to walk you through why this particular compound, and not just any plant extract someone slaps on a label. Researchers studying men with enlarged prostates have looked specifically at beta-sitosterol, and controlled studies have documented real improvement in urinary symptom scores, stronger flow, better emptying, meaningfully less of that sudden urgency when men took it consistently over several weeks. This isn't folklore passed down from a grandfather's home remedy. It's been tested directly against a placebo, and the men taking it reported measurable improvement on standardized symptom scales doctors actually use to track this condition. Now, something you don't hear enough in videos like this. Not every plant remedy in this space has held up under scrutiny. Saw palmetto, the herb a lot of men have heard about for years, has actually had mixed results in larger trials, some showing benefit, others showing no real difference from a sugar pill. I bring that up because I think you deserve honesty, not whatever sounds good in a thumbnail. Beta-sitosterol is different. It's one of the few plant compounds in this space with a track record of consistent, positive results across multiple controlled studies, which is exactly why I paid attention when I first came across it. The mechanism researchers believe is behind it makes sense once you understand the squeeze we talked about earlier. Beta-sitosterol appears to help support healthy inflammatory response in prostate tissue and may help ease some of that pressure on the urethral channel, supporting more complete emptying and a steadier flow. It's not a switch that flips overnight, and it's not a promise the prostate shrinks back down. Nobody honest tells you that. It's support, working with your body over time, alongside whatever your doctor already has you doing, never instead of it. One thing worth saying clearly, if you're on blood thinners or you're managing other prostate-related medications, please talk to your own doctor before adding beta-sitosterol or any new supplement to your routine. It's generally well tolerated, but your doctor knows your full medication list, and that's a conversation worth having before you start anything new, not after. Adding beta-sitosterol to my diet wasn't the whole picture for me, though, and I want to be honest about that too, because a single food or supplement rarely solves something that took years to build. I built out a short, nightly system, 3 pieces working together instead of any one thing carrying all the weight. The first piece. I cut caffeine and alcohol down sharply in the evening hours, starting around mid-afternoon. Both act as irritants to the bladder lining and as mild diuretics, which means they're doing double duty against you right when you can least afford it, irritating an already reactive bladder while also pushing more fluid through it. Cutting back didn't eliminate my urgency overnight, but within a couple of weeks I noticed the sudden, no-warning episodes happening less often. The second piece was something a physical therapist who works with older men explained to me. Pelvic floor exercises, done consistently, a few minutes a day. Strengthening those muscles gives you a genuine buffer, a few more seconds of real control when urgency hits, instead of that helpless feeling of a wall arriving with zero warning. She was clear that consistency mattered more than intensity. A few minutes daily beat a long session once a week. The The third piece was double voiding, urinating, waiting about 30 seconds, relaxing, and trying again. Because the channel is narrowed, the bladder often doesn't finish emptying on the first pass. That second attempt catches what got left behind, and starting from a genuinely emptier bladder means it takes longer to reach that trigger point again, buying you real time and real warning next time urgency starts to build. None of these three pieces did much in isolation. It was the combination. The beta-cytosterol working on the underlying pressure over weeks, the caffeine and alcohol reduction easing irritation every evening, the pelvic floor work and double voiding giving me practical control in the moment, sustained for close to 2 months, that actually changed my pattern. The first few weeks felt like nothing was happening, and I nearly gave up around day 10. The real shift showed up gradually, starting around week 5 or 6, less a switch flipping than a slow lengthening of the warning I got before I had to move. Last spring, my wife and I drove 9 hours straight through to visit her sister, something I would have flatly refused 2 years earlier without a hotel stop planned every 90 minutes along the route. This time I just drove, stopping when we wanted to, not when my body forced the issue. I sat through the whole visit, 3 days of long dinners and longer conversations, without once excusing myself in a hurry or scouting the nearest restroom before I sat down. I think about a man named Aldo, 79, who wrote in after watching one of my earlier videos. He told me the sudden urgency had cost him his seat on the church choir, which he'd sung in for over 20 years, because he could no longer trust himself to stand through a full service without an emergency. He'd assumed, like I once did, that his bladder had simply worn out, the way tires wear thin after enough miles. Hearing that the actual squeeze came from the prostate pressing on the channel, not the bladder failing him, was what finally made him willing to try something, instead of quietly resigning from things he loved. Aldo started keeping a small container of pumpkin seeds by his coffee maker, the way you'd keep something you actually intend to eat every day. He added the pelvic floor exercises during his morning coffee, since he was sitting there anyway, and cut his afternoon coffee down to 1 cup instead of 3. He told me the caffeine reduction was the piece that surprised him most. He hadn't realized how much of his own urgency was self-inflicted until he cut back and noticed the difference within days, well before the beta-cytosterol would have had time to do much on its own. He's back in the choir now, and he told me that mattered to him more than almost anything else that's happened in the last few years. If you're on any prescription for your prostate, your heart, or your blood pressure, please hear this clearly. Nothing I've described here replaces your treatment, and you should never stop or adjust a medication without your doctor's guidance. Bring beta-cytosterol, or anything else from this video, to your own doctor first, every time, no matter how ordinary it sounds sitting in a video like this one. Here's what I settled on: a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once. The growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact, none of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video, go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. What I want you to walk away with is this. That sudden can't-wait feeling isn't your bladder failing you after a long, honest career of service. It's a channel being squeezed by a gland that grew without your permission, forcing your bladder to work overtime and warn you later than it should. Once you understand that, the whole problem stops feeling like a mystery about your own body turning against you and starts feeling like something you can actually work with, piece by piece, alongside your doctor. I think about all those years I quietly declined invitations, skipped my own granddaughter's graduation, mapped restrooms instead of living my life, convinced this was simply the toll of getting older, that nobody could really explain it. There's a particular kind of loneliness in carrying something like that silently for years, certain it's not worth mentioning to your doctor, when the explanation was sitting there in real research the whole time, waiting for someone to lay it out plainly instead of rushing past it in an 8-minute appointment. I think about the man I was in that paint aisle, hand on the sink, ashamed of something my own body did without asking me. And I think about the man I am now, who drives 9 hours without a hotel stop, who sits through long dinners without a second thought, who said yes to things I used to quietly decline. It's a small thing to most people, trusting your own bladder again. To me, it's the clearest proof I have that this body still listens when you finally understand what's actually squeezing it. If any part of this sounded familiar, the sudden urgency, the mental map of every restroom, the invitations you've quietly turned down, tell me in the comments how much warning you typically get before you have to go. I read every single one myself, and I mean that. And if an explanation like this one, honest about what works and what doesn't instead of promising a miracle, is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this every week, and it matters more than you'd think that you're here for it.